for responses tonight, 30 seconds for rebuttals. You will notice that we are socially distanced here, not only at the podium, but across from each other, each person separated between 7 to 12 feet. Random draws have been determining the podium position, the order of closing statements, and who gets the first question. Janet Wu will take the first question to Representative Kennedy. Janet?
Congressman, Senator Markey paints you as just another Kennedy, ambitious, wealthy, and using your family's name to win this race. Your family has been in politics for over a century. How are you cutting a different path, if at all?
Janet, thank you. And thanks, everybody, for being here. Look, I got in this race because I believe that Massachusetts deserves more from its senator. If there's a connective thread between the election of Donald Trump, the devastation of COVID-19, and this moment of racial reckoning we're seeing, it's that we've got to Washington and a justice system that steals black and brown lives. And we got a Washington, D.C. that thinks that you're going to solve that problem by some back room far away. And it's not going to work. It never has. This change is going to come from our communities. And the fact is that Senator Markey spends less time here than any other member of our delegation. He lives in Washington, D.C. But at a time when we needed him most, over the course of the past year, when we were legislating for a response for COVID-19, he missed over 50% of those votes. We can't afford that absent leadership, particularly not now. And if I elected, I will give our state my heart and soul, because this is my home. It's where I'm raising my family.
But the question is about your family and your relationship to your family. Are you any different from Senator Kennedy?
Too. I would not claim to be anywhere near the same type of legislator or leader that they are, and they were, in the contributions that they've made. Would I aspire to try to make the same commitment that they have to our country and to our Commonwealth? Absolutely. And the lessons that I take from them is that politics and leadership is about how you serve a community. It's about being here and being present for people when they are in their time of deepest need. I believe that politics can make a difference for those folks, and I would be honored to be able to prove it in the U.S. Senate.
Senator Markey, you just heard your challenger. You've been in Congress for 44 years. At least 2 of your constituents recently came forward and accused you of ignoring their pleas for help after the loss of their sons. One whose black son in college was killed by a white police officer, and another whose sons were kidnapped and they were taken out of the country. They say they agree they are supporting your opponent, Congressman Kennedy, but they say only because he reached out and actively helped them and you did not. What's your response?
Well, I'm very proud of my constituent service. When I'm in Taunton and I hear from grieving families that they've lost their children to fentanyl, that have fundamentally changed the way in which we deal with the opioid crisis in our country. When the fishermen came to me just back in March and said that it will lead to a collapse of the industry unless we get help for them, Elizabeth Warren and I, we went to bat for them. And we were able to get $300 million for the fishing industry in Massachusetts. When the gig workers told me that there were 255,000 of them in Massachusetts, which would receive no unemployment benefit, either from the state or the federal government, I worked successfully to get $600 a week to them, and then I go to Washington and deliver for them by providing real leadership nationally.
Why did these 2 fathers did not get help from you?
Well, again, in terms of my constituent work, I am proud of it. And I work very hard in order to make sure that I deliver for the people of Massachusetts, and I've done that consistently throughout my career. And whether it be the fishermen, the gig workers, the opioid crisis, that is who I have been throughout my career.
Senator Markey, speaking of D.J. Henry, you said recently that you apologized to his father, Dan Roy Henry, after he released a video criticizing you. But what specifically did you apologize for?
I can't imagine the pain that the Henry family has gone through. It's unimaginable that they have lost a son. I to the family for that. I worked with Congressman Kennedy to make sure that we wrote 2 letters to the Justice Department to seek to open an investigation. The Henry family deserves justice, and I am going to continue to work in order to provide that justice to them, and I apologize to them for their disappointment in the meeting.
But not for responding to the Henry family request directly, sir.
Right, I'm saying I know that they were disappointed in the meeting, and I apologize for that.
Mr. Kennedy.
For those that are wondering still what the difference between wife and removed from the country, and he came to me to ask for help, and we did everything we could, working with the State Department, the U.S. ambassador, to try to make sure he could see their kids. And we were helpful. Senator Markey, in his own words, did nothing and was looking at his phone. When a mom and dad came to ask for justice for their son who was murdered in New York by a police officer, we did everything I could. And the fact is that we still haven't been able to provide justice for the Henry family. But when they met with Senator Markey, according to my office wrote, was somehow sufficient. It's not when you lose a son. And I think the fact that a United States senator thinks that this is somehow enough is emblematic of why we need change.
Senator?
Again, I have the 2 letters here. We worked together over a year. We sent those letters to the Justice Department in order to open an investigation, and we did our job. We partnered with the congressman in doing that, along with Elizabeth Warren.
Do you also offer an apology to Colin Bauer for not being able to respond to him?
Well, I know that Senator Kerry talked to the president of Egypt about that case, and again, we want to work to make sure that we get a resolution of that issue for that family.
A father came to a United States senator after his children were kidnapped and taken to a foreign nation, and he got nothing in response. A mom and dad came to a United States senator, not been able to unify and reunify Colin with his kids, and I have not been able to actually deliver on justice for the Henry family. But the difference is that you try. The difference that we can make in this position is that you help when people are in need, and in their deepest level of need, because their children have been killed or taken. And if you think that a letter or 2 letters that somebody else wrote is enough, then fine. But I promise you that as your senator, I will not rest for you and your family if something like this were to happen on my watch.
Senator, I would like to give you
And
the
again,
last.
and I will just say this, okay, for the thousands of families across Massachusetts who suffered the loss of their children in the opioid crisis, I went to bat for them. I got the laws changed in our country in order to protect those families and those children. When it comes to the education of the children in our state, right now there are 12 million children who do not have the internet at home. They're black, they're brown, they're immigrants, they're poor. And so it's my legislation that provides the internet on the desk of every child, and it's going to be a catastrophe where a homework gap is going to lead to a learning gap, which is going to lead ultimately to an opportunity gap for all of those poor children in our state. So when I hear from families and they say they need help, I go to bat for them, I go to Washington, and I ensure that these laws get passed, they get changed so that families in the Commonwealth get the protections which they need.
Bob Oakes is going to pick up the questioning from here.
All right, Ed, thank you very much. This is a question about voting and protecting democracy, especially this fall. The U.S. Postal Service is warning states not to depend on mail-in ballots to arrive on time. President Trump said today that we may have to redo this election this fall. What can Senate Democrats do? What should they do before the election besides rail against Republicans and the White House about this? And Congressman Kennedy, you first.
Bob, thank you. So first off, the Senate needs to pass the bill that we passed out of the House months ago, the HEROES Act, which provides $25 billion in support for the post office. That money is funds that President Trump's Board of Governors, the people he appointed, bipartisan, but he appointed, have requested. The effort that the Trump administration is engaging in to actually try to undermine our elections, but even more than that, undermine the delivery of our mail, our paychecks, unemployment assistance, prescription medication. This gets to the very heart of the fabric of our society, and we can't rest until there are answers. That's why we're having votes this Saturday in Washington, D.C. for the House of Representatives, and why there's going to be hearings early on Monday to try to hold Mr. DeJoy to account and make sure that they roll back some of the measures that they put in place. But this is where the combination of
Senator Markey, same question. What can you do to force Mitch McConnell to come back to Washington to deal with this?
Well, look at right now, Mitch McConnell is aiding and abetting Donald Trump and DeJoy's effort to swipe this election. Plain and simple. It's just a heist they're trying to pull off. And we need, one, to put $25 billion into the coffers of the post office through rain, sleet, snow, gloom of night, or coronavirus. They're coming to our doors. They've lost revenues. We have to help them. Number two, DeJoy should resign immediately. Number three, we need to conduct an inspector general investigation of DeJoy and his political connection as a crony and a major contributor to Trump. My fear is that, like Michael Flynn or other of Trump's campaign cronies who he's had to pardon, that DeJoy is just another in a long line, and we have to absolutely force them right now to deal with this issue because democracy is at stake. This election is at stake, and Trump is in the process of trying to steal this election and maybe wind up in the Supreme Court hoping for another 5-4 vote, as happened in 2000 in the Gore v. Bush election.
Can I?
Quick answer to this question, please, if you would, Senator. How are you voting this primary day?
Urging people who really have some concerns about voting in person that they should take advantage of the very generous opportunity which is being presented to them to apply for a ballot and to send it in safely so that they do not have to risk their health, especially those who may be at greatest risk for coronavirus.
Okay, and Congressman Kennedy, are you voting in person or are you going to mail it in?
Probably voting in person. I've actually requested my absentee ballot or my vote by mail ballot. I haven't received it yet, so hopefully that comes soon. But if not, I definitely will be voting, and I'd like to have that option. But I do think, Bob, look, when COVID-19 was so devastating back in the spring, I was one of the folks banging the drum to make sure that we made these accommodations, because we should never, in Massachusetts, should never leave a choice to our citizens to choose between our leaders at Beacon Hill to actually make these accommodations, because I think it's so critical for the health of our democracy and our country. But that's the type of leadership I've demonstrated in the House, and what I think is so necessary at this time for those that think, as the senator has said, this is defined by the bills that you pass and the votes that you file and the bills that you cast. You got what I mean. But for those that think that that's it, there's so much more that is needed and necessary. There's so many other ways to lean into these challenges to make sure that we actually address the needs of our
That's good time, Mr. Kennedy. Senator, would you like to say something?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the job of a legislator is to be a legislator. You have to listen to your constituents and then go to Washington in order to legislate. I have 500 laws that are on the books because I listened and on the climate crisis in our country. That's what I do. I work in order to create the environment where ultimately we can pass laws to protect people in Massachusetts after I've heard from people back here in Massachusetts. And I've done that 500 times with laws, and I'm doing it right now with the Green New Deal.
I want to accelerate this. You have something quick to say, and I'll give you a chance to respond.
The senator has oftentimes referred to this figure of over 500 bills to his name. The senator is including bills that he co-sponsored, literally signing his name to somebody else's work. That's it. Under that definition, I am an author of the Green New Deal. The difference is I wouldn't claim to be. But by throwing your name on somebody else's work doesn't mean that you led the effort to pass the law.
Senator, what about the claim?
Look, when I took on the oil industry and the auto industry to increase fuel economy standards to 54, to do the research on the causes of gun violence in our society and make NRA stand for not relevant anymore in American society, that's my law. When I put together the program for $30 billion to find the cure for Alzheimer's by the year 2025, that's my law. When I passed the insider trading law to take on Wall Street bad guys who rip off ordinary Americans, that's my law. So I could go on and on. An internet safety law for all children in America, the internet on the desk of every child in America, that's my law. That's my law. I have 500 of these laws, and I'm very proud of that record. And if you want to yield back to me again, I will continue on the litany of success I've had for the people of
We want to move on to Janet Wu with the next round of questioning.
I'd like to talk a little bit about schools, which is on the minds of just about everyone that's watching the show tonight. Massachusetts schools, for the most part, have made their decisions on how they're going to reopen this fall. Teacher unions say remote is the only safe option. Governor Baker said...
This decision should be totally made by the science. It shouldn't be a date. It should be the data that determines whether or not the schools open. honestly, of all the bad cabinet officers, Betsy DeVos, I think, is the leader in terms of worst cabinet secretary as the Secretary of Education. So I think ultimately we have to ensure that the safety of the children and the safety of the teachers is made paramount, which is why, again, I'm the leader in the Senate right now fighting for the $4 billion that makes sure that every child gets the internet at home. They're not going to be in a normal situation this year. They're not going to be in a normal. They don't have the internet at home. So we should just begin to anticipate that those kids will not be in school, that they're going to need the internet at home. And if they don't get it, it's going to lead to a homework gap that's going to lead to an opportunity gap for millions of children in our country. And I have been the leader on this issue in the Senate right now and throughout the history of computers being on the desk of children in schools across our country.
But my question was, is Governor Baker right? Let the decision be made by individual cities and towns, or are the teacher unions right in the sense that there should be all remote in Massachusetts?
Again, until there's a guarantee that these schools are safe, then we should err on the side of safety.
So you're saying the teacher unions over Governor Baker?
That can lead to. We're seeing it in other states where little mini pandemics are breaking out.
Or should the teacher unions win this one and that it should be all remote in Massachusetts?
So Janet, this is the biggest issue across Massachusetts today. No matter where I go, up on the North Shore, out in Springfield to Pittsfield, and down on the Cape. And I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. This literally is the conversation I have with my wife every day, and we don't know. We don't know what to do. You talk to friends around the state. Some school districts are opening, some are closing. The numbers between them aren't all that different. We know that cities and towns are looking at bare bone budgets. We know that so many families look at this and say, if my kids can't go to school, how do I go to work? How do I make a mortgage? Look at the economic devastation that's confronting us. But no one wants to send their kids to school if there's a risk to their health. But also no one wants their kids to fall behind, the social kids, and help our families. We've passed that money out of the House. It needs to come to the Senate. I think the families need to be able to actually make that decision with the information that they have, and I don't think they do. And I'm not sure trying to say it's one or the other here is an adequate representation of what those families are confronting and what needs to happen. We need additional resources, and that's got to come from the federal government.
Bob Oakes.
But we don't have those resources right now, so should it be all remote, or should each community make their own decision?
I think you're going to ask the communities to make their decisions, but I think you've got to give flexibility to parents. And Janet, this is critical because if you just allow for that to happen without additional allocation of resources, you see this massive divide take place. And that's something that we have to confront. And just briefly here, because the senator said that you should anticipate this. I was on the phone with a teacher the other day from Townsend, who has tried for 10 years to get the internet to her house because she's now teaching these kids remotely. She was told to buy the telephone poles so that she could get broadband to her house. She's got a $360 a month cell phone bill. How we are expecting her to be able to teach those kids, even if you can get a computer and internet on the school of those children, and that happened as a result of the Telecom Act that Senator Markey said was his proudest achievement.
Senator, you have some reaction to that?
Yeah, look at that's what this $4 billion program that I have every Democratic senator signed up for is going to be, that is necessary for these children. And beyond that, when we finally do have a big infrastructure bill in our country, I am proposing tens of billions of dollars that get spent that will ensure that it is deployed ubiquitously, broadband, within our society. And we need to do that as soon as Joe Biden is sworn in as president. One of the big problems here, of course, is that at home, many of these families just can't afford the cable service. They can't afford it. And so that's where the Wi-Fi now is going to be necessary, paid for by the federal government to ensure these families, these children, get access to the educational opportunities they need.
Very briefly.
Both of you can get a quick word. I'll give it to you. Go ahead,
Senator, you wrote the Telecommunications Act of 1996. You've said that's one of your proudest achievements in Washington. That created cable bills that are astronomical. That created massive inequities in internet. There's still 18 towns in Massachusetts that don't have access to broadband, and that teacher who was literally told...
The Telecommunications Act has created tens of thousands of new jobs in Massachusetts. I'm very proud of that. But I'm even more proud of the $54 billion program, still the largest educational technology program in the history of the United States, that provides the internet on a desk of children in Chelsea, in Lawrence, in Roxbury, Mattapan, and Springfield. That's my program. And all I'm saying right now is that it has to get extended to home because kids are going to be home, and the federal government at this time should provide that service. And that is what I'm leading, and no bill will pass ultimately out of the Senate that hasn't included that additional $4 billion.
So let's hit a lightning round just to change up the pace a little bit. Question one, Senator Markey, let's start with you. Sure. Brief answers if you don't mind, sir. Sure. How are you getting back and forth to D.C. these days, and will you get on an airplane again?
I'm not going to actually get back on a plane until I'm sure that it is 100% safe. And so I'm just doing the commute in a Ford hybrid.
Representative Kennedy, how are you getting back and forth?
These days, flying.
Yeah, and you're flying, and there's no issue with you?
No.
No. Representative Kennedy, who has done a better job mitigating the pandemic, the U.S. Congress or Governor Charlie Baker?
I think Governor Baker has. And I think the House of Representatives has actually done a pretty good job of this. We've passed literally $7 trillion of assistance to provide additional help to families, to our healthcare sector.
Senator?
So I'd say the House and Governor Baker.
Senator, who's
him on January 22nd to brief Congress on something that hadn't happened yet, the coronavirus. On January 27th, I asked him to name a czar. I was the first in both instances.
So who's done better, Congress or Governor Baker?
In my opinion, he's been criminally negligent. He hasn't deployed the Defense Production Act yet, so we can massively use fund. So it's clearly not Washington. It is the state of Massachusetts and Charlie Baker.
Last question, Representative Kennedy. What three current Republican U.S. senators do you admire the most?
Three current Republican
current Republican senators.
Oh, Ed. Man, now you got me thinking.
Three current Republicans you admire.
Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, who I partnered with on opioid legislation. Roy Blunt from Missouri, with whom I partnered on Alzheimer's legislation. And John Thune from South Dakota, with whom I partnered just in December to ban robocalls in the United States. And that law has now been signed by President Trump. And by the end of this year, all of you out there, robocalls will become a thing of the past.
Racism, is it still deserved? And what specifically have you done to change it?
There is structural racism built into Boston as it's built into our whole country. And we have to work very hard in order to continue to change the whole course of history that has brought us to today. So yes, the income gap between those who are white and those who are black or brown and poor is vast. It's like $240,000 for a family versus $8 for a minority family in Boston. That is unacceptable. So what we have to do is work in partnership to change our housing laws so that people can have access to suburban homes with change in zoning laws. We have to change the education rules so that people have the educational opportunities which they deserve. We have to guarantee that we break down all of the structural racism barriers that continue to exist so that they can maximize their God-given abilities. And that is something which I am completely committed to seeing happen on the floor of the Senate beginning in January of 2021.
Congressman Kennedy, same question. Do Boston and Massachusetts?
I think unfortunately we do. And I say that because that's what I hear from communities of color, particularly black community in Boston in particular, all too frequently. And I hear it also from black visitors that have come through Boston. I hear it from friends that have come through our city and our state. And listen, this is my home. This is the place that I'm from, and where we're raising our kids. And so we have to do an awful lot better. And yes, it means looking at the structures to our economy, the $247,000 for median net worth of a white family to $8 for a black family. But it goes beyond that. Yes, it's looking at those structures on healthcare and transportation and infrastructure. But it's also getting to the core of the fact that we still have sins of the past from desegregation and the brutal fights over desegregation in the Boston public schools, which, by the way, the senator was against.
Time, Mr. Kennedy.
That we have to address.
Janet Wu.
Congressman, do you support the elimination of life without parole?
With our criminal justice system and move to a more humane policy, which says that people can work while they're incarcerated towards the goal of eventually receiving parole. And I think that is the correct policy for our country moving forward.
Does this apply to the case of the Boston Marathon bomber?
I would make an exception for a terrorist, but for everyone else, they should qualify for parole.
What about you, Congressman? What about the Boston Marathon bomber?
You know, Janet, I thought a lot about this one. There's obviously this has impacted my family as well, and parole doesn't mean you're granted it. But I do think that victims and victims' families need to be heard in that, because there are people that have done some really bad things, and while I think people have, as it's been termed, a right to hope, people who have done some really bad things, victims' families need to have a right, and they need to be protected too.
So the Boston Marathon bomber?
I stand by my position on it, but I think before any decision would be made on that specific case, those victims' families need to be heard loud and clear.
Bob Oakes has the next question. Bob?
Since the death of George Floyd, there have been growing calls for police reform around that. And what do you reject? And Senator Markey, you first.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very important question. Without question, we have to reimagine policing in America. We're 5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the prisoners behind bars in our country. We're 5% of the world's population. 1 in 3 women behind bars in the world are behind bars in the United States. We have more African-American young men behind bars right now than the total number of slaves in the year 1850. So it's time for us to change the system. We have to work to close down this school-to-prison pipeline that has opened up. We have to stop criminalizing being poor, being black, being brown, being an immigrant, having mental illnesses, or having substance abuse problems. That's what we have to do. We have to reimagine this system so that we spend less on incarceration and more on education, more on Opportunity Act, which is going to be the bill on the floor of the Senate next year to deal with the need to fundamentally change our criminal justice system.
All right, Congressman Kennedy, what about you? Defunding the police.
Bob, I think the senator got that most of that right. I think we do need to address mass incarceration, which was a result of a bill that Senator Markey voted for in the 1994 crime bill. And so we need to tackle that structurally. We need to make sure that we address issues like the fact that the 2 largest providers of mental health care in our country are the jails in LA and Chicago. When you talk to our sheriffs in Massachusetts, the folks that run our jails, they'll tell you that between 80 to 90% of incarcerated individuals are suffering from substance use disorder, mental illness, or both. And so yes, additional investments, particularly in mental health, but in education, housing, wraparound services are a critical piece to this. But I also think it's critical to listen to the other part that Senator Markey mentioned, because he actually voted for that 1994 crime bill that led to mass incarceration. And he claims to now have partnered with Cory Booker on the Next Step Act. Cory Booker introduced that bill a year before Senator Markey signed on to it. A year. So glad that he signed on, but a year later.
Senator, do you have any response to that?
There's only 2 sponsors of this bill, Cory Booker and myself. That's it, out of 100 senators. So I am leading on this issue with Cory Booker, partnering with Rachel Rollins, the district attorney of Suffolk County. And I think the fundamental changes which have to happen go right to the core of what people in our country. And that's why I partnered with Cory Booker on that, and with Cory on calling for an entire revisitation of the issue of reparations for the African American community in America in the post-slavery era.
I would love to have both of you, if you don't mind, looking at the screen, because we have a question from the UMass Boston McCormick Graduate School. Here's the question. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Crystal Gale-O'Neill, and I'm a PhD student from UMass Boston. On the issue of international students, the mixed signals from the administration has made it very hard for students and schools to plan. With classes only weeks away, can the Senate do anything to relieve this uncertainty?
Mr. Kennedy, can the Senate do anything?
Crystal, thank you. It's a great question. So, yeah, the Senate can. The Senate can pass a bill to try to protect international students, to try to make sure that students are able to come to the United States, which again, given the COVID challenges, are additional level of complexity. But the fact is that students should not be bearing the burden on that, and a Trump administration should not once again be weaponizing an immigration system to take it out on foreign students. They are an extraordinary asset, particularly here in Massachusetts, and provide a huge injection of students, protects our immigration system, and demand accountability from a Trump administration.
Senator Markey?
Yeah, what makes our country great is that we are a country of immigrants. And Massachusetts is right at the top of the list of foreign students that come to our country. So the business plan for Massachusetts is pretty simple. One, we want the smartest kids in the world to come to school here. Two, we want to give them access to the capital they need to set up their own little small companies and hire their friends. Three, we give them access to the best educated and trained workforce in America. And four, we lay out the red carpet for immigrants around the world to come here because we know that they are key to starting up new businesses, to creating new opportunities, and upwards of a third of all the new companies in Massachusetts are there because of the immigrant community. So it is absolutely essential that we just stop Donald Trump and his race to hate again. Well, you can't do that and say that about Muslims or immigrants or Mexicans or women of color. We need them in our country. They are what is going to infuse that entrepreneurial spirit into our society that will make us greater in the 21st century.
You wanted 30 seconds to respond?
Just briefly. I appreciate the senator's viewpoint on this, but the fact remains that in 2013, in the midst of a debate around comprehensive immigration reform, the senator was the only member of the Massachusetts delegation to side against the Obama administration, against the House Democratic Caucus, against the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and try to maximize the number of immigration detention beds that were available for ICE. He was the only one from Massachusetts to do so.
Senator, your response to that?
Look at Ward as the Man of the Year by the Massachusetts Immigration and Refugee Association just 2 years ago. The job that we have to do for our country is to make sure that they who are planning on where they're going to go from anywhere in the back know that they're welcome here in Massachusetts. But the country,
that's 30 seconds.
And that inscription that Emma Lazarus wrote on the base of the Statue of Liberty should still be what guides us today, and that is what has animated my whole career, including the need for us to have a pathway to citizenship for all 11 million immigrants in our country right now. That is the best way.
We're at a second speed round right now. We'll start with Senator Markey. Should TikTok be shut down or blocked here in the United States? Yes or no, sir?
I think it's wise to have it be sold to an American company.
Congressman?
I think it could be purchased by an American company with the proper safeguards.
Representative Kennedy, do you or your spouse own a firearm?
No.
No. Senator?
No.
No. Senator Markey, the damaged Christopher Columbus statue in Boston's North End, should it be returned or should it be permanently removed?
I think it should be removed and replaced with a statue of Tom Menino. I think it represents who we are in the 21st century in Boston.
Congressman?
I think removed and put in a rightful place for history.
Congressman Kennedy, when was the last time you cried?
Yesterday.
Senator, when was the last time you cried?
It was on Sunday at an event when I heard a statement that was made that was just so powerful that I could not stop in my emotional reaction to it.
Senator Markey, do you think the Equal Rights Amendment will ever become law?
I think we're going to head for that day. I think electing Kamala Harris as our vice president is going to jet propel.
All right, I would like you, if you don't mind, look at the screen. We have another student question for you. This one from the UMass Boston McCormick Graduate School. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Natalie Shelato, a student at UMass Boston. Public colleges are facing a crisis. International students can't get visas, and students are demanding refunds and tuition cuts with remote learning. What will you do as a senator to fix this problem?
Let's start with the senator, Senator Markey.
Yeah, well, let's just begin with my feeling that community colleges in Massachusetts should be free and public higher education should be free. I think that's really where we should be heading. It's just unconscionable the choices that we're making young people make in our own home state. With regard to all students, I think that they should have the option of a refund. I don't think they should be tied to having their funding personally be tied to circumstances that are beyond their control. And I think we have to have total flexibility for these individuals. It's very, very expensive to go to college. And whether you're an international or domestic student, you should have the ability to ask for your money back or some reduction in charges that reflects the changed circumstance.
Are you okay, Congressman?
Yeah, sorry about
Need
that.
a second?
Water. Apologies. So forgive me, and apologies to the senator.
If you need a water, we can get you one.
No, I messed up drinking. So
Okay,
apologies.
okay.
So, and apologies to the senator for coughing during the question. Back to me.
Yes, back to you. Do you have a response to demanding refunds and tuition cuts with remote learning? What would you do as a senator to fix
Yeah,
that
so
problem?
look, Ed, I think what needs to happen here, and Natalie, thank you for the question, is again, this is where the federal government needs to step up. Why? Because we are presented with a series of false choices. Look, the educational, because they can't make ends meet. They're under enormous stress. But you can't then turn around and expect families to have to pony up full tuition for something that's not going to be anywhere close to that experience or that quality. The way we backfill is by the federal government providing those resources, ensure that those educational institutions are able to make things work, provide support for families so that they're not left financially devastated, and again, surge resources so that we can actually get our arms around this critical virus so that we can get back to school and get back to work into some semblance of normalcy.
Janet Wu has the next question.
Congressman, when this race started, you rejected super PACs. And in fact, just a few months ago, you referred to it as dark money. But now your family, including your twin brother, is soliciting money for a super PAC that is spending well over $2 million to help you. Are you being a hypocrite?
No, I tried over and over and over again to have Senator Markey stick to his word from 2013 and ask him to sign on to the same pledge for months. Shannon Liss Reardon, and at that point another candidate in this race, and I held a press conference, and we signed the same pledge, and Senator Markey's signature was missing. The only reason, Janet, why super PAC money is in this race is because the senator refused to stand on his word.
But you could have said no.
I did.
Continue to say no rather than accept the
And
family.
I've said no, and that's the. Do I wish super PACs weren't in this race? Yeah, I do. But the reason why they're in it is Senator Markey invited them to, and wouldn't.
Is the congressman correct? Are you being a hypocrite?
No, we need a new pledge for 2020, and that is that all of these groups that are out there, environmental, women's groups, civil rights groups, they should be able to speak in Massachusetts. As long as the money is disclosed totally, and as long as their message is positive, we should welcome them in the age of Donald Trump.
But you were against it at one point.
Well, again, we need a new pledge for this year. What's going on here with the super PAC that is supporting Congressman Kennedy is that, according to Boston Globe, it's being run by his twin brother, and it is being funded by his father's money, which has fossil fuel money in it. And so what I'm saying to the congressman is that he should just tell his father to stop funding, to tell his twin brother to stop running negative ads on television here to these campaigns. And I will say this right now. I will say this right now.
Senator.
I call upon him to disclose all of the money inside of his super PAC and to make sure it's not negative. I will do the same thing and right now say to whoever is backing me, make sure it's totally disclosed. And I would ask him to say the same thing to
Let's get the record straight here on a couple of things. One, the only reason why there's super PACs in this race is because Senator Markey wouldn't stick to his word, first. Second, the senator has now put forward a second pledge saying that he wants to make sure it's positive voices. His super PAC has accepted a donation from a misogynist who lost his board seat at Uber because he said women talk too much at board meetings. No Democrat took his money, but Senator Markey did. Senator, if those are shared values for you, then by all means go ahead. That's not the type of thing that I want. And so you have manipulated a pledge over and over.
Time, sir.
The fact is this money is coming in because you wouldn't stick to your word. That's it.
Look at right now, I just say this. Right now, we don't have any idea. None who has contributed
That's
to
not true.
the super PAC, which
That's
his
not
twin
true.
brother is running. It's
That's
not
not true.
public.
It
So
is.
all I say to the congressman is, tell your twin brother, tell your father to make it. But see, we have no idea.
That's not true.
And so
They filed this requisite disclosures.
they have not disclosed who the contributors are.
They
have
have.
not disclosed it yet.
It's a series of labor unions.
They have not disclosed. No one has any idea who is contributing to
Check the
that super
disclosure.
PAC. And all I do is just ask you, again, to tell your twin brother and your father to disclose. And that should be a rule for a Markey, a Kennedy,
Congressman.
a Smith, or a Jones. There should be
Senator.
only disclosed money, and it should be positive
Senator,
campaigning.
you're the reason why this money is in is you would not stick to your word for months. You've flipped on it multiple times. You've accepted money from a misogynist. Your donors hide behind additional nuances in laws called C4s. That is your choice, and that is your super PACs are abiding by the law. The supporters for the ones coming in to support my race are doing the same. The fact is, I don't like super PACs. I said that publicly a million times. I'll say it again right now. I wish they weren't here. You invited them in. You can't invite them in and then tell them they should go away when they do things
Senator,
that you don't
one
want.
response.
It's your father.
That's the whole point.
It's your father, your twin brother. Just tell them to stop the negative ads and to disclose all of the contributors. That's a simple thing to do.
Senator,
it's your father.
Senator,
It's your father. Just tell him.
And I love my dad, and I'm proud of my dad.
So
and
tell him.
I've told him a number of times. Senator, this is the whole point. You can't coordinate. That's the thing.
Well, I'm telling anyone backing me, disclose your money so that anyone can know who it is.
Including a
C4? Make sure it's a positive message that you're delivering. If you could say the same thing to your father and brother, I think it would be very helpful for the voters of Massachusetts.
And Senator, for the person that lost their board seat at Uber because he said that women talk too much, is that a positive voice?
We don't have any idea who's contributing to your father's.
Next question.
All right, gentlemen, you both agree on almost every major policy issue, and you stand almost shoulder to shoulder against almost everything President Trump does. Yet, as you've repeatedly demonstrated in this hour tonight, and as you just demonstrated, this campaign has grown increasingly bitter and personal over the past few weeks. So the question is, why? Congressman Kennedy, you first. Why? Why was this necessary?
Why was it my candidacy necessary, Bob? Because I believe we deserve more out of a sentence.
No, why is it necessary to go so negative?
Bob, that's a great question. It's a question for the senator who started negative campaigning against me literally from the moment I got in this race. And that's the reality of it, from digital advertising to emails to elevating voices of supporters that have targeted my supporters, bullied my supporters. One of his supporters said that cyberbullying works and bragged about it, to say nothing of the way they have targeted me and my family with stuff that I will not repeat here. And up until just last week, not a word coming out of the senator. And so, yeah, I wish that didn't happen. I wish we could run on the ideas that we have and to keep this well within those bounds. That's unfortunately not the way it happened.
Same question for you, Senator Markey. Why go negative?
Well, I agree with you 100%. And that's why I'm saying to Congressman Kennedy, just to tell his father and his twin brother, just stop it. Stop these negative ads that are just polluting the airwaves of Massachusetts. We don't need this as part of a 2020 election in Massachusetts, Senator, in the era of Donald Trump.
Senator,
so from my perspective, we should be talking about the families who are watching this tonight. They want to know what we're going to do for their family's education. They want to know if we're going to pass
wait a minute, Senator. Wait a minute, Senator. If you're saying that and you're thinking that way, then don't you also think you owe Democrats an apology for this sideshow when they're most concerned about beating Donald Trump this fall?
Well, again, it's the congressman's supporters who have started these negative commercials on television. I don't want that. I want a positive message, a vision for what our country can do for the families out there in this race, rather than, and I agree with you, rather than this negativity.
Senator.
All right, Congressman Kennedy, are you ready to apologize to Democrats for the way this campaign has been run?
Look, Bob, from the moment I got in this race, my record, my family has faced negative attacks from Senator Markey's campaign and supporters. Again, through campaign emails, through digital videos, through supporters who have targeted me in ways, again, that are not appropriate for this audience, but obviously include threats on my safety repeatedly. And I don't think there's any place for that in politics at all. But that hasn't stopped the senator and his campaign from pulling back at all. And so, look, do I know that primaries can get contentious? Sure. Do I think that primaries are still valuable? Yes, I do. But there's a line that was crossed that shouldn't have been.
I'll give you a quick response,
Again,
and then you can have a quick response.
I don't think the congressman wants any of his supporters. I certainly don't want any of my supporters to be engaging in any of that negative conduct. And I think that's the message that we want to send to anyone who's out there. As this race becomes contentious, we don't want those
Congressman,
kind of
give me the
messages
final word on
that are
that.
being sent.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Adrian Marker.
Congressman Kennedy, millions of Americans have lost their jobs this year and are struggling with unemployment. Nobody in Congress got laid off, and in fact, both of you have health care, pensions, and you're both wealthy. What makes you qualified to understand your constituents' concerns?
Adrian, thank you. Look, no doubt that I come to this position with tremendous privilege, and I've tried to be as upfront and deliberate about that as I can. But I think that is why the way in which you leverage this position, and we use this position, is so important. You have to be present in our communities. You have to understand the challenges that families are confronting in Dorchester and Roxbury, Mattapan, and in Chelsea and in Lawrence and in Springfield. Because it's not enough just to say, hey, we went down to Washington and passed the bill. Adrian, I've done hundreds of stops over the course of the past several weeks with dozens of small business owners that didn't receive any of the nearly $1 trillion of support that the federal government got. Not a dime. They either were rejected, didn't know about it, didn't complete it, still waiting on it. And that was supposed to be the pipeline to keep those businesses afloat, to keep those families fed, and they got nothing. And so if you are not here, if you're not literally in our streets and in our communities listening, learning, talking, and using that to drive the policy change back in Washington, you're missing the boat.
Representative.
That's how I have led, and I think it's a big difference between me and the senator.
Senator Markey, the same question to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. When I announced for the Senate, I grew up in Malden. My father's from Lawrence, so I went up to ring the doorbell at 88 Phillips Street in South Lawrence, first floor of a triple-decker, to see who lives there now. I rang the doorbell, and a Dominican family came out onto the porch. The accents were different, but the aspirations clearly the same for that family as for the Markey family. Now, my father drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company. He grew up there with 5 brothers and sisters, and his son is a United States Senator. So I know how fortunate that I have been. So from my perspective, I could see my mother and father trying to figure out how to pay the bills at the kitchen table through my whole life growing up. And I know that families all across Massachusetts are struggling with those bills right now. And it's our obligation to make sure that the federal government responds to those concerns, to make it through this pandemic, because I know right now they are lying awake at night worrying about those bills.
Before we get to the closing statements, one last quick lightning round. Representative Kennedy, should Election Day be a national holiday?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Markey?
100%.
100%. Senator Markey, have you given up on the Red Sox this season?
I'm bullish on the Bruins and the Celtics in the playoffs.
Does that mean yes?
I have to admit that you'd have to be bottom shopping right now to be investing in the Red Sox. But with a couple of new pitchers at the trading deadline, I wouldn't give up hope, because they got that couple of new wild cards.
It's supposed to be quick,
that could be in the playoffs.
Congressman.
Doesn't look to be the best year on that.
It does not. Representative Kennedy, if you were to lose the primary, what is the first thing you would do the next morning?
Whatever my wife wants.
Senator, what is the first thing you do the next morning?
I think that's one thing Congressman Kennedy and I agree upon. It's been a long campaign.
Very, very smartly done. It's time now for the closing statement from the candidates. You each have 45 seconds. We determined that before tonight's debate. Congressman Kennedy, we flipped a coin. You come up first. You're up first, sir.
Thank you, everybody. My family's come up an awful lot in this campaign. I want to take a moment to tell you what they taught me. Taught me that leadership isn't about power. It's about humanity. It's about the messy stuff, the hope and the hurt, the common currency we share in a world that gives and takes far too much, far too often. My grandfather, kneeling by a starving boy in the Mississippi Delta. My old Uncle Teddy, by the bedside of people suffering and struggling. By my grandmother, in every fiber of her 92-year-old body, and in every breath that she's taken. You want to know about my family? Ask me about them. Because their legacy is my lesson. And I will give, if I have the honor of being your senator, I will give you everything I possibly have. Because that's my example, and you deserve nothing less. I hope to earn your support and your vote on September 1st.
Senator Markey.
Thank you. Families in Massachusetts right now want something so basic, so simple, that we shouldn't even have to say it. They want their children to dream about the future rather than having to fear it. The job of a senator in Massachusetts right now is to deal with those concerns that families have. That's why I am fighting for healthcare justice with Medicare for All, environmental justice with the Green New Deal, educational justice to make sure every child gets the opportunity that they deserve, criminal justice so that we dismantle this incarceration system that we have in our country right now, and economic justice where it's just so wrong that 3 billionaires right now control more wealth than the bottom 50% of our population combined. Martin Luther King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. All of our hands must be on that arc, bending it towards justice. I promise to the people of Massachusetts that if I'm given the honor of still being your senator next year, that I will fight to bring justice to the floor of the Senate for votes on every one of those issues. I ask for your vote.
2 weeks from tonight is primary night. Are you gentlemen ready?
Let's do it.
Ready to go.
Ready to go? Senator Markey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The political tide has turned on the rising seas. We are reclaiming our leadership on the most important issue facing humankind. We can deliver a Green New Deal for America. This is an incredible moment. All of the supporters who are here today support the climate, clean energy, social justice, public health. We are talking about repairing the historic oppression of frontline and vulnerable communities. The most powerful movement organizing in the United States today. Grassroots organization. We can deliver a Green New Deal for America. We can deliver wind, solar, offshore wind. It will only be through an historic, generational commitment to end climate change that we create the kind of democracy that works for all Americans. Never in our history have the interests of all Americans been so united. I want to thank my fantastic partner, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We will save all of creation. Our energy future will not be found in the dark of a mine, but in the light of the sun, of the sun, of the sun.